Hi, and welcome to the Social Ref online course. My name is Sean Madden. I have been a recreational referee for over 20 years and also the founder of Underdog Sports Leagues. And so over the last 20 years, I've had the chance to work with hundreds of new recreational referees and umpires across all different shapes and sizes. And what we found is that there's one universal. The referees that make it, that survive those first scary 15 games and go on to become great referees who allow people to have fun, keep the game safe and fair, and are so good that people actually want them to ump their games and ref their games, all have one characteristic. They start by focusing on communication first. They don't worry about goofy signals. They don't worry about memorizing the rule book over and over and over again. They don't worry about regurgitating information. They don't worry about winning arguments or trying to be right. They focus on communication first. And so that's what we mean when we talk about a social ref. Social ref isn't someone who's just friendly. A social ref is somebody who has great interaction and engagement with players because they're masters of communication first. Specifically communication with regards to information habits, the ability to diffuse conflict in tough situations, and the ability to be a proactive referee and exhibit good game control. So if the question for your program or for your own personal reffing career is, what makes a great recreational official? The answer for us is clear. It's communication, but part of that communication is changing the way your brain thinks. And that's sometimes difficult, especially if you've been a player in the past, or especially if you watch a ton of sports as a spectator. So one of the key ideas of the book is that before you even worry about memorizing your rule book or learning penalties or signals or assessments, is you have to think about the way your brain thinks. And we talk about a core concept called brain switches. What are the default factory settings that are built into your brain that are actually going to make it harder for you to become a great recreational official? So we go through these concepts. We have a ton of examples from real life reffing across multiple sports, but hopefully the idea is that it doesn't really matter what sport you're doing. We don't know your rule book, we don't know what sport you're in, we don't know how your league is set up, but we do know that these communication ideas are universal. Information habits and becoming the scoreboard is universal. Dealing with player conflict and player confusion is universal. Being able to make that conflict less of a problem and instead of trying to run away from that conflict or sometimes attack that conflict head on, great referees, great social refs are able to diffuse that conflict, but they don't take it personally. They understand that conflict is part of the job, it's part of the game. So no matter what sport you're doing, no matter what your rule book says, learning these 5 key communication habits, which we'll go through in this course, and learning the 5 key phases that those habits are best worked on is a big piece of making it through your original decision to ref, your training and learning phase, your first 15 games, your 15 to 50-ish games, and then your 50-ish to 150 games. Those are roughly the 5 phases, and each one of those phases we're going to focus on a key habit. Each key habit has corresponding brain switches, has corresponding ideas and simple starts to think about, and also has corresponding traps to avoid. Because no matter what your sport, no matter what your league, people are kind of the same, especially when it comes to sports, especially when it comes to winning and losing, and especially when it comes to conflict. So I will be your guide throughout this process. We'll try and reference a lot of the material that is in the book, but hopefully because we're also on video, I'll be able to be more descriptive and instructive instead of just the words sitting on the page. So you'll see me give a lot more examples in terms of your voice, in terms of your body language, in terms of your book cover, in terms of ways you can use communication to become a great official and deal with this one interesting philosophical concept that in many cases, a brand new referee, like you might be sitting there right now, always wants to focus on making the big call first. Again, it's not your calls, it's your communication. If you start with the foundation of your default brain instincts, if you start with the foundation of your default information habits and routines, and you can get the information and the game information right first, and your signals right first, and your movement and your engagement with the game right first, then your calls will be better. Your calls will be more accurate. Your ability to communicate with players will be easier if you get the simple stuff right first. But most programs we've seen actually start backwards. They focus on make sure you're right 100% of the time. Make sure you memorize that rule book and you can regurgitate every rule no matter how big or small it is or how frequently it's used. We just think there's a better and different way, which we've used at Underdog for the last 18 years and which I've seen work even with people who've never umped or reffed a game before in their life. So, if you're willing to give this new concept a try on starting with communication, no matter what your sport, no matter what your rule book, starting with communication and communication habits, and becoming the scoreboard and dealing with game information as a trigger to eventually move better, make better calls, and have more credibility as a referee, I welcome you and we invite you to keep watching and go through some of these key habits and these core ideas of becoming a great social referee.